Good evening from a rather stormy Iranian capital. Tonight we are live from Iran, where the evidence and signs of war remain all around us. While the negotiations are in suspended animation and officially a ceasefire is still in place, the reality in the last 24 hours has been missiles, drones and carnage. Attacks on shipping and the Gulf states, this time Kuwait and Bahrain being dragged into the war. The Strait of Hormuz is even less passable tonight than it was last week. And there are new warnings of global economic slowdown and even recession from the OECD if this continues. Iran's position has hardened over Israel's strikes and threats in Lebanon. But Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu insisted he's battling global hatred and lies and claimed he and Trump still agree overall, despite what he called tactical disagreements. That's not quite how Trump put it today, seeming to admit to shouting and swearing at Netanyahu in no uncertain terms.
You were angry with him. You said, "Are you effing crazy? What are you effing doing? I helped you stay out of jail." Is that true? Did you speak to him in those terms?
I did. I wouldn't say angry. I was a little bit perturbed.
Both sides say the ceasefire between the US and Iran remains in place. But that line feels ever less grounded in reality. Iran launched drone strikes on Kuwait today, killing one person and leaving dozens injured. Tehran said its strikes were retaliation for US attacks on an Iranian oil tanker and Qeshm Island in the Strait of Hormuz. US Central Command claimed it was responding to attacks by Iran. On the diplomatic front, there seems little sign of progress towards a deal, as Harry Fawcett reports.
Iran's military sending a message this morning that it has the capacity still and the will to launch major barrages of missiles and drones at targets across the Gulf. Among them, Kuwait, an attack comprising 13 missiles and 17 drones, the government said. Diplomatic missions struck along with the international airport, the roof of Terminal 1, holding together about as well as this ceasefire.
وقد نتج عن هذا العدوان الإيراني الآثم.
This heinous Iranian aggression targeted civilian and vital facilities, including Kuwait International Airport, resulting in the death of an Indian resident and several injuries and significant material damage.
Iran said it was responding to US strikes, including on one of its tankers. The US said it carried out defensive strikes after failed Iranian missile attacks on its military bases. And so, for all the recent talk of imminent agreement, of a final determination from President Trump, the Strait of Hormuz today still gridlocked. On a sympathetic podcast, the president invited to say the confusion and contradiction was all intentional, the art of the deal.
No, it's just the way I am. It changes. I mean, I could leave here, I could give you an answer, and then in 20 minutes go into the Oval Office and say, "How are things going?" And I realize my answer is now incorrect, okay?
You had a phone call with Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, in which you were angry with him. You said, "Are you effing crazy? What are you effing doing?" Is that true? Did you speak to him in those terms?
I did. I wouldn't say angry. I was a little bit perturbed at his constantly fighting with Lebanon. You know, at some point I said, "Bibi, we got to stop this. We got to stop it."
I think he understands that.
The recipient of that advice determined to make the best of being publicly branded effing crazy by the President of the United States.
Sometimes we have, as in the best of families, you have these tactical disagreements. We always find a way to work them out, and we do so as great friends. We can disagree in the morning, and by the afternoon we have common action.
Trump's frustration that the fighting in Lebanon is stymieing progress in talks with Iran. He'd said on Monday that both Israel and Hezbollah had committed to stop, but there has been no let-up. Israel today striking a vehicle close to Beirut, along with numerous targets in southern Lebanon, where there were also more funerals today. The cost here measured not in delays to a deal, but in personal grief.
The village is deeply saddened by the strike on the son of the town, the doctor and his 2 children, who are university students, while they were on the road returning from their exams.
In northern Israel, some restrictions lifted today, schools reopening, even as Hezbollah fired rockets and a drone into Israeli territory. This evening, Kuwait state news agency released new images of the aftermath at the airport a montage of destruction at odds with the portrayal of an imminent end to this conflict. Iran's foreign minister saying any further hostile act would be met with a decisive response. Little has so far been decided, either by 6 weeks of war or 8 weeks of shaky ceasefire.
Well, our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, joins me now from Beirut. Lindsay, things appear to be escalating in Lebanon. What's going on?
They really are. I understand that at this moment, Hezbollah is firing rockets into Israel, and it's been a very heavy day for attacks, a long list of places in the south of this country which Israel has hit. I think that Netanyahu is doing this because he knows that Iran is insisting that Lebanon be part of any deal. He's trying to hit Hezbollah as hard as he can before Trump tells him in no uncertain terms, maybe even more uncertain terms than before, that he has to stop. And the Iranians, I think, are pushing Hezbollah because they want to drive a wedge between Netanyahu and Trump. And they may be succeeding in that.
Well, how is all this affecting alliances in this part of the world?
Well, I think everything is changing. The Gulf countries now see the price that they are paying for their alliance with the US. Kuwait saw it definitely this morning. And it is making those countries less prosperous and less stable. And so I think that although they declare support for the Americans in public, they may feel that they want to sort of pull back a little bit, because what we may see is not quite peace and not quite war for a very long time. I don't think anybody expects that any deal done now will be a permanent deal that will be peace into the future. This region has changed. And the other thing that isn't resolved is the fundamental rivalry across the Middle East between the Islamic Republic of Iran and Israel. That is absolutely unresolved, and it will continue to play out here in Lebanon. And the cost here is lives, 3,500 lives since March, and more than 10,000 injured. That, we are saying, is the legacy of President Trump's war of choice against Iran.
Lindsay Hilsum in Lebanon. Well, in the last few minutes, the latest from the Iranian government is that they have denied being responsible for the explosions in the airport in Kuwait. Joining me now is Fouad Izzadi, a professor of political studies at Tehran University. Thank you for joining us. Sure. If the government here is denying that attack, who else could have done it?
What the military has said is that these are Patriot missiles, American Patriot missiles trying to shoot down Iranian missiles. Sometimes they misfire. They have done it before. The government here is saying what they're saying is that this is misfiring missiles hitting at places that Iran is not responsible for.
I mean, you know, both sides now are in this position where they deny key things. You know, the Americans still haven't taken responsibility for hitting the girls' school in Minab,
yes,
even though there is an image of the missile.
True.
And here we have this explosion in Kuwait. I mean, doesn't it do everyone a disservice when people do not take responsibility for the realities of war?
It should. We have, as you said, video of American Tomahawk missiles hitting the school. It was a double tap, so it wasn't just once. I think the Kuwaiti government they have a lot of CCTV available, especially around the airport. Maybe they can provide the image of the missile that hit the airport, and experts can say whether this is Patriot missiles or Iranian Shahed missiles or whatever it is.
Where do you think we are overall in terms of the diplomatic process? The Americans still say there could be a deal tomorrow, next week, anytime in the next few days. Is that how it feels to you here?
You know, Iran wanted to avoid the war. If you listen to the Omani foreign minister's interview with CBS News, the American television, before the war, Iran was actually very close to reaching an agreement, according to him. And it was Trump and Netanyahu that started the war shortly after that interview. Iran wants to have an end to this war. You know, US spends 100 times more on its military in comparison to Iran. These are two nuclear regimes attacking a non-nuclear state. So it would be foolish for Iranian leaders to want to continue the war. But we have to see whether Trump can put a leash on Netanyahu, whether he's actually interested in reaching peace. or he's doing Israel first. We have to wait and see.
But it's not just that, is it? Because there is a basic problem in the negotiation, which is that Iran is saying, it wants the unfreezing of assets and the lifting of sanctions if it is to open the Strait of Hormuz, and the Americans are saying that has to be linked to the nuclear question. There is an impasse, and somebody's going to have to give way.
Yes. Iran has done a lot. Iran did that nuclear agreement in 2015. It was Trump that left the agreement. So there should be some confidence building measures. But the people who are responsible for killing more than 3,500 civilians in Iran should be doing the confidence building measures according to Iranian leaders. Iran has not killed any American civilians. Iran is basically defending itself. Putting a blockade on Iranian people's money is against international law. Blockading ports is an act of war. You don't do that during ceasefire.
But doesn't Iran also effectively control what Hezbollah is doing in Lebanon? And that is carrying on, and they are still firing because they're being told what to do here.
They are in the same position as Iran is. They're supposed to be under ceasefire, and they have lost more than 400 civilians in the past month during the ceasefire. So when your country is attacked, you respond accordingly, whether Iran is telling you or not. Israeli attacks on Lebanon started many years before the victory of Islamic Revolution in 1979. So this type of attacks, Israeli attacks on Lebanon, is nothing new. What is new since the last 47 years is that Lebanese have figured out a way of getting help from Iran when they're defending their country.
Professor Azadi, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Well, joining me now from Kuwait is Dr. Badr al-Saif, who used to be a Deputy Chief of Staff for the Prime Minister of Kuwait and is now an Assistant Professor of History at Kuwait University. Thank you for joining us tonight. What do you make of the Iranian claim that it is not responsible for the attack at the airport?
Not surprising, Krishnan. This is part of the Iranian playbook. Plausible deniability has been something that we've been acclimated to in the past 47 years, on and off, depending on the occasion and the context and the event. We've seen attacks in the past few weeks, whether during the ceasefire or prior to that, an active combat between the Iranians and the US. And this is unfortunate because the Gulf states, Kuwait, are no part of this war. We've declared early on that this is an illegal, unnecessary war by America and Israel against Iran. And the attacks on Iran on the Gulf states are also illegal and unnecessary. So trying to widen the scope of conflict is not going to do anyone any good. We need to have sanity prevail. We need to work together on finding a conclusive end to all of this, and we need to go to the root causes. And it's not only related to the nuclear program and the enriched uranium. We should reach out to all the other files, including Iran's regional behavior, as well as Israel's regional behavior. Both need to be addressed in tandem.
Right, but where does Kuwait stand with regard to Iran? Because is it not reasonable to conclude that if you have an American base or American soldiers on your land, you're on the American side?
Look, Kuwait, like all countries in the region, are sovereign states. They make their choices and decisions on how they conduct their affairs. And no one has interfered with Iran's decisions when it comes to collaborating with other countries, whether it be the Russians or the Chinese or even other neighbors. And the same goes for us. What's for us to show Iran is that neither our bases or airspaces are being used against them. Those bases didn't come to attack Iran. They came in the aftermath of the occupation of my country, Kuwait, and there was an imminent threat from Saddam's regime at the time out of Iraq, and the relationship evolved into a defense partnership alongside many other countries, Krishnan. It's not only the US. So that needs to be cleared, and we need to be treated as normal states who can have agency and conduct their own businesses. It's unfortunate that many in Iran don't see us in this light.
Do you think the Gulf states need to rethink their position in the world?
We're in constant rethink mode. Let me tell you, we're embarking on a national transformation plan. The region is changing as we speak. The Gulf states see themselves at the epicenter of the region. We find certain spoilers in the region that we need to address, whether it be Israel or Iran. And we want a region in which everyone shares it responsibly. We look at prosperity as an end goal and a process, one that can be partaken by all parties involved. We're not here to segue and segment prosperity. We think it can be shared by everyone. And that vision should be for the peoples of the region, because they're the ones that matter. We're in one of the youngest populations in the region, and they don't deserve this death and mayhem that we've been facing across the Middle East for decades.
Dr. Badr al-Saif, thank you very much indeed. Now, the war is over, so said the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio as he appeared before senators yesterday. But with the US still waiting for a response from Tehran to President Trump's latest amendments to peace proposals and disagreements between the White House and Israel being aired so publicly, what chance is there that Mr. Rubio's claim might come true? Our US editor, Anushka Astana, joins us from Washington, D.C. Anushka.
You know, in this job, I spend a lot of time listening to testimony on Capitol Hill behind me. And the last 2 days, Krish, have been fascinating. Marco Rubio has spent hours taking questions in the Senate yesterday and in the House today. And those heated exchanges with Democrats really tell you a lot about how this war is playing out here in America. On that point that he said yesterday, that the war is over, Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs came back today. She represents San Diego with the largest concentration of military personnel in the US. And she said, tell that to my constituents, including 2,500 Marines who are still off the coast of Iran. And she said, if it's over, who won? Now, Marco Rubio's response was to say that the Operation Epic Fury part of this, when America was hitting Iran day in, day out, that's the bit that's over. And the Americans consider it a victory because they have degraded Iran's military capability. But what Democrats came back on that was basically, give us a break. You haven't done a deal. The president have suggested that the blockade could go on until September. We've seen more strikes overnight. This is not over. And were you warned about the possible consequences? Rubio's response to that was to say, we were warned about all the possible consequences, but we thought that a nuclear-armed Iran would be worse.
Well, the Democrats were pushing Rubio's buttons. How did he respond?
Well, he responded quite angrily at times, and they were using quite dramatic ways to push his buttons. At one point, he was asked about Trump falling asleep when he was talking. Marco Rubio said he never falls asleep. He calls me at 2 in the morning. So they showed him a video of Trump falling asleep while he was discussing the war itself. At one point, Rubio hit back and said, is this a Foreign Affairs Committee or is it a circus? But in truth, all of the questions really brought up issues that are really bothering the American people.
Anushka Astana in Washington. Well, let's just take a breath for a moment and remind ourselves how we got here. War began on the 28th of February with the US and Israel striking Tehran and sites around Iran, killing the supreme leader Ali Khamenei and more than 175 children and teachers at a school in Minab. Iran immediately hit back, firing drones and missiles at Israel and targets in the Gulf, Iraq and Jordan, and stopping ships from passing through the Strait of Hormuz, driving up oil prices. 2 days later, Hezbollah began firing rockets and drones at Israel in solidarity with Iran. Israel quickly responded, bombing Beirut and dragging Lebanon into the war. Just over 5 weeks later, President Trump announced a ceasefire that has broadly held, but Israel has continued to attack Lebanon, and the Strait of Hormuz is still largely closed, with the US launching its own blockade of Iranian ports. Well, one man who predicted many of these events is Nate Swanson. He advised Biden's White House on Iran and was then the State Department's representative on the Trump administration's Iran negotiating team. He wrote an article just before the war started, warning of a global economic shock and a quagmire that would be difficult for America to get out of. And he is now director of the Iran Strategy Project at the Atlantic Council and joins us from Virginia. I mean, I suppose given how things have turned out, being right can't be very satisfying.
That's exactly right. It's extremely unsatisfying. It's been all bad news.
So, I mean, we saw Rubio saying everybody knew how Iran would respond. under attack when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. Do you believe that, and do you think that's clear from the way the American administration mounted its action?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think it's been very clear in some of the leaks and interviews that have come out since that the bureaucracy in the United States government was doing its job. It was outlining what the threats were, what the possibilities were, and that information was ultimately making it to our cabinet secretaries, including Secretary Rubio. What I think we've seen since then, though, is that when the president was making the decision to go to war, they weren't raising these concerns with him. So ultimately, the blame for this war is with President Trump and President Trump alone, but also his closest advisors who failed to actually be honest with him.
So what is the way out?
Well, that's a great question. I think the way out is probably twofold. One, it's a recognition that going back to war isn't going to change the status quo for the benefit of anyone, not for Iran or for the United States. So there has to be this acknowledgement, which is sort of there, that it's in both sides' interest to end this diplomatically. That's proven to be much more tricky than I think anyone anticipated, and I think partially it's because substance is less important than the perceptions right now, right? So there's been this perception, I think, in the U.S. and in Iran that they need to win the negotiations. The war was sort of indecisive, so they need to be perceived as the winner of the talks. And that's really where the stalemate is occurring. It's not on the substance. Everyone agrees the strait needs to be, reopened to traffic. Everyone agrees that, Iran will get some sort of financial compensation, sanctions relief. And then, hopefully there will be some, at a minimum, talks about Iran's nuclear program. I mean, all those details are agreed to. The problem seems to be, who is perceived as the winner. And, this is a new dynamic in U.S.-Iran negotiations, where in the past, the U.S. would always give Iran the rhetorical victory and take the substance. And now neither side wants to give anyone the rhetorical. So, I think we just have to set that aside and focus on the substance, essentially.
Well, I mean, when you get to the substance, isn't it the case that the United States probably could have struck a better nuclear deal in January before this war started than it is able to now?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually go back and say when I was still in government, I think our best opportunity for a deal was before the 12-day war. It was really in the run-up to June 2025. I think at that point you saw Iran was very interested in a deal, willing to consider new options, and was really, worried about the prospect of war. So I think their position hardened after June 2025 a little bit. And so what I was seeing out of the negotiations, before the war was less than before the 12-day war. But yes, even still, you would have had a better deal in January of this year than you're going to have now. And so, time has only made the deal worse and put the U.S. in a worse position. But really, we would have been better off doing a deal before there was any war at all.
If you're hearing some bangs, they are just fireworks, because there is a religious festival tomorrow and another big celebration that people are getting ready for this evening. I mean, just finally, what do you think all of this says for America's place in the world and whether it has been substantially damaged?
I mean, it's a great question and something I think every American policymaker and analyst should be thinking about, because there's no doubt that this is a blow to the U.S. and to the U.S. standing. I think the hope is that we can recover from it, right? The U.S. has had plenty of other mistakes and failures in the past, and most of the time we've been able to learn from it and come back stronger. So hopefully that happens again, but this does have the chance to really impact our standing, and most crucially with our partners, right? Our European partners, our Gulf partners. None of them are happy with us right now, and it's very justifiable. So hopefully we'll learn lessons from this and kind of redouble our priorities on partnerships with our closest allies and go from there. But I'm very worried about the long-term implications of this for the U.S.
Nate Swanson, thank you very much indeed for joining us.